Wherefore, seeing we also are compassed about with so great a cloud of witness, let us lay aside every weight and the sin of which doth so easily beset us, and let us run with patience the race that is set before us, looking unto Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is set down at the right hand of the throne of God. I would like to welcome you today to the regular Sabbath service. As you can see, I'm not in church. I am at home, and I just had a FaceTime call with Joshua so he could set me up, because if not, it was going to go from my phone. And so he has set me up. So this should be broadcasting live right now to you. I hope it is anyway. He said he was going to check, and I'm sure if it isn't, he would be calling me at the moment, and I don't have a phone call. So it looks like it is going live now. For those of you that are not a member of the church that do watch, I would just like to explain to you that we do not celebrate Christmas in our church, basically because we follow the holy days that God designated for us to follow, and those are Feast of Trumpet, Feast of Tabernacles, Passover, unleavened bread, and a Day of Atonement, plus the Sabbath. And so we do not celebrate Christmas. Not that we don't believe in the birth of Christ, we do, but just that it wasn't designated that we should celebrate his birth. So for us, it is a regular day, and the reason why I closed the church down was because of a small procedure that I had done, which I did tell you about, and everything went really well. So I would like to thank everyone for their prayers, and I did hear from quite a few people, and I want to thank you for praying and thinking about me. So we're going to have our scripture reading today, and we are in John chapter 11, and I am going to read verses 1 through 15 of John chapter 11. Now a certain man was sick, named Lazarus of Bethany, the town of Mary and her sister Martha. It was that Mary which anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped his feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was sick. Therefore his sisters sent unto him, saying, Lord, behold, he whom thou lovest is sick. When Jesus heard that, he said, The sickness is not unto death, but for the glory of God, that the Son of God might be glorified thereby. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. When he had heard, therefore, that he was sick, he abode 2 days still in the same place where he was. Then after that saith he to his disciples, Let us go into Judea again. His disciples say unto him, Master, the Jews of late sought to stone thee, and goest thou thither again? Jesus answered, Are there not 12 hours in the day? If any man walk in the day, he stumbleth not, but he seeth the light of the world. But if a man walk in the night, he stumbleth, because there is no light in him. These things said he, and after that he saith unto them, Our friend Lazarus sleepeth, but I go, that I may awake him out of his sleep. Then said his disciples, Lord, if he sleep, he shall do well. Howbeit Jesus spake of his death, but they thought that he had spoken of taking the rest in sleep. Then said Jesus unto them plainly, Lazarus is dead, and I am glad, for your sakes, that I was not there, to the intent that ye may believe. Nevertheless, let us go unto him. And may God add his blessing to this reading from his word. So you can see we're at the point in the life of Jesus where he has left the area of Judea, basically because this is where he was in Jerusalem, and the Pharisees wanted to stone him and kill him, and so he had gone away from there because he knew it wasn't his time yet. And so this particular account that we're looking at in chapter 11 describes the great miracle that Jesus performs in raising Lazarus from the dead. John records this miracle, and he is actually the only other gospel writer that does record the raising of Lazarus from the dead. And of course, you know, as commentators look into this and Bible scholars look into it, they have come up with some reasons why it's possible the others did not record it. First of all, we know that the Jews wanted to kill Lazarus to eliminate the evidence that Jesus had raised him. This makes sense. They don't want anything that has done and said to be part of history, and they just want to get rid of him just completely. So they, I'm sure the other writers were afraid that if they wrote about this, that Lazarus might be killed, whereas the Gospel of John was written much later than the other Gospels. So some commentators have supposed that perhaps the earlier writers didn't want to include this event or this miracle because they wanted to minimize the threat on the life of Lazarus. The more that they spread the claim of miracles, the more likely the Jews were going to want to eliminate the evidence. And of course, eliminating the evidence would mean getting rid of Lazarus. But by the time John wrote his gospel, it was many, many years had passed, and it may have been that Lazarus was already dead himself, or that the threat was minimal because such an amount of time had passed. But the miracle did need to be recorded, so John went ahead and added it to the list of miracles. Remember, the book of John includes many miracles proving that Jesus is the Son of God. And of course, this was going to be an eyewitness event, a record of the event. So another particular explanation suggests that John was the only one that was there at the time to witness firsthand what had happened. We don't know which apostles went with Jesus to visit this particular house. It doesn't state in the Bible who was there. If Matthew could have been elsewhere, Peter could have been elsewhere, and we know that Mark's main source was from Peter. So if Peter wasn't there, Mark wouldn't have had the information he needed. And so because John was there and recorded it firsthand, it was left to him to be that firsthand witness. In any case, as with all the other miracles, there was no reason to doubt that the miracle happened or to believe that the apostles even doubted it themselves. It is definitely a record of Jesus and the events and the fact that the other gospel writers did include other people who were raised from the dead, a miracle that happened then too. So the record needed to be written by an eyewitness, so John did so before his death. So let's go through the account right now of what happened at this particular time. So the account introduces us to some new characters who have had a prominent role in the life of Jesus. Now remember, we do not have a day-to-day, hour-to-hour account of the life of Jesus while he was here on the earth. We have little snippets of things from the four gospel writers. Some of them have the same accounts. Others have different accounts. Again, this is the only gospel that includes the resurrection of Lazarus. But these three people, Mary, Martha, and Lazarus, we're told were important in the life of Jesus, although this is the first time in the book of John we see them mentioned. We're told they lived in Bethany. Bethany is about 2 miles from Jerusalem, and we know that that's not a place that Jesus wanted to be in at that point. And we know also that during the last part of his ministry, right before his death, Jesus stayed in Bethany, and for all we know, he was staying at the house of these three siblings, but we're not sure. We just know he was in the area. We are told that on another occasion, Mary had anointed Jesus with ointment, and she had wiped his feet with her hair. This, of course, is John writing these events after they happened, and he includes this side note, it's almost like a side note, to identify who this Mary actually is, because we know there are many different Marys in the Bible. So he wanted everybody to be certain that this was the Mary that had worshiped Jesus in this way. So, still at another occasion, Jesus taught at their home, and this is recorded in the 10th chapter of Luke. And in this account, he rebukes Martha for being so concerned about the meal she wanted. So Mary was worshiping Jesus. She was sitting at his feet listening to him, and Martha was busy going about her business, making sure that there was enough food for everybody that was there, because I'm sure there was a crowd there listening to Jesus. And she got a little upset with her sister because her sister wasn't giving her any help. And so Martha was being, the good hostess, and she was making sure everything was ready for everybody. But when she was a little upset with Mary, Jesus rebuked her and told her that, he wasn't always going to be with them, and so she needed to set aside her the duties of getting everything ready and to worship him as Mary had done. And I think this has always been a good example for those of us that don't sit down to rest and don't sit down to have time in worship, that we're just too busy to do so. And we see that with church attendance. People are just too busy on the Sabbath, even though that's a 24-hour period that you should be worshiping, but people are just too busy on the Sabbath to even bother to spend an hour in church, and now it's not even an hour. And so this was a rebuke from Jesus to Martha, that she needed to put aside the world and to remember to worship him. And of course, every account that we have in the Bible is for us also. So this is certainly something we should take to heart. So as the account goes on, we see that as Jesus is not near Jerusalem anymore, but he's a distance away, they send a message, the sisters, as in Mary and Martha, send a message to Jesus telling him that Lazarus, and it is the one whom Jesus loved, that he was sick. Perhaps they hoped he would come and heal him. Now, they had obviously known of his miracles. They may even have been present at some of his miracles. Again, we don't know. But they obviously knew who he was, being his good friends, and they obviously knew what he was capable of doing. So I'm sure that, being that they were a big part of the life of Jesus, they thought that he would come right away and heal their brother. And this idea that they actually contacted him when he was far away really does solidify that they were good friends, because you don't usually call someone in to help you out when someone is sick unless they're good friends of yours or family members. But we see from the account that Jesus was quite deliberate about his decisions and what he did. He said specifically that this sickness was not to death, but it was for God's glory and for the Son of God to be glorified. He said similar things about the blind man that he had just healed, that we had read about earlier. And the point is here that he's saying that Lazarus would not die, but we know he did so as we go on with the account. But his death was not going to be the final result or the main result that was accomplished by his sickness. Instead, there would be glory to God, and Jesus is what would result from all of this. So clearly, Jesus knew that Lazarus was going to die, and that when he got there, what he was going to do was raise him from the dead. Yet, Jesus continues to go about his business, and he calmly allows Lazarus to die. Though he knows this death is going to cause great grief to his family. He knows that, his sisters are going to be very upset by his death, but he says other affairs to take care of, and that going back to an area that is close to Jerusalem, remember I just told you it's about 2 miles away, would be dangerous for Jesus. We also know from other accounts that Jesus could have healed him from afar. He didn't need to be directly in the presence of Lazarus to do so. He had healed the nobleman's son. and this was from chapter 4, which we already looked at. But his entire manner in this whole account of Lazarus' illness shows that he was deliberately allowing nature to take its course, knowing full well that what he was going to do was to raise Lazarus from the dead. This would have been a great miracle. There would have been people around to witness it, and it would have been more convincing proof of who he actually was. So the purpose of miracles, as we have stated again and again, is clearly demonstrated here. If, as some claim, the main purpose of miracles was to relieve human suffering, so good people do not have to suffer, then why did Jesus allow Lazarus to die? Why not heal him to avoid all this grief? But clearly, this miracle had a higher purpose, and this purpose was really to show and to give evidence of who Jesus really was. He wasn't just healing somebody that was sick, maybe by putting a salve on him or something like that, but he was actually raising him from the dead. As we go on in the chapter in verse 5, Jesus, we know, loved all people. That's one of his main commandments for us, which is really difficult at times. But we see here that he has had an especially close attachment to some people. Obviously, his disciples, who he traveled with all the time. And this is not wrong. And Jesus is really telling us it's not wrong, that we can have a different kind of love for different people in our lives. And this statement is included in this point in order to, I believe, show us that Jesus wasn't indifferent about the fact that Lazarus was sick, or that he wasn't concerned about the sisters who were going to be suffering in this, but he chose to let Lazarus die, even though he could have prevented it, and that he really did love them. And I think that's one of the reasons why that statement is put in here. Also, one of the messages here is that his main concern at this point, the reason why he was here on earth, was not to prevent all human suffering. That wasn't why he was here at this particular point. He was here to lead people to his message and to the fact that he was going to die for their sins. So his miracles were here just to prove who he was, and that it wasn't just to alleviate all suffering, because he would have then just did a blanket miracle for the whole world at that time. A lot of misinformation has been made about this simple statement that God is here that Jesus was here just to relieve pain and suffering, that Jesus only loved those that he was close to, but that is certainly not true. And another thing that I see happening, especially in movies, my husband and I were watching, just for a brief moment, the history of the Bible this week. I think it was on the History Channel or something, and it was about Joshua and his overtaking of Jericho. And as we were watching it, it was about the spies going in and Rahab. And there was so much misinformation given in this one little 5-minute clip of the Bible, because they wanted to sensationalize it, and so that people will watch it, of course. Well, you don't need to sensationalize the Bible. It's just amazing the way it is. And so one of the things that I have seen happen in many movies and accounts that man makes, not following the Bible to the letter, but putting in their own ideas, is that they say that Jesus had a special relationship with Mary, in that maybe they were together as lovers, but there is nothing that states that here. And this is really just nonsense, although I've seen it many, many times in many accounts and many movies. And I think it's because people seem to be unable to have a concept of a pure and holy love, one which you can love someone to the point that you're going to die for them, but it doesn't include lust or or anything like that. They can't just conceive of a love that would be like that. There is not a shred of evidence that Jesus had a relationship of that kind with Mary or any other woman. And we know that the Bible considers any relationship outside of marriage as sinful. And so we certainly aren't told that Jesus was married. So he would not have done this type of thing because we know that he was without sin. We know that the Bible itself is filled with passages describing love that is greater than any kind of love that you might feel or see. This type of love is the sincere concern for the well-being of others, and it is characterized by how God and the Father and the Son are shown to us. Jesus, we're told that we have to even love our enemies and do good to them and pray for them. We're told and we're told that in many verses in the Bible, and in Matthew, Romans, 1 Corinthians. We're told that parents should love their children, and that's found in Titus chapter 2. And we know that this is a pure and holy love, having nothing to do with anything else but a pure love. And this is the type or the sense of love that Jesus had for Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And really, it is foolish and groundless when people make into movies or preach on it this way, that there was something more going on with Jesus and Mary. So as the account continues, after hearing about the fact that Lazarus was sick, Jesus actually waited 2 days. It tells us he waited 2 days. And then he suggested that he and his disciples go to Judea. Now, it tells us here that the disciples were surprised that Jesus was going to do this, again, because they knew, as did Jesus, that his enemies were going to be looking for him because they actually wanted to kill him. So they are really quite surprised that he wants to go. So Jesus tells his disciples, after they show this concern, that he has something he needs to do, that while we have an opportunity, we must do the work we can do. So Jesus knows his time is not long on this earth, and that there will come a time when he won't be able to do any more, just like there will come a time when we can't. And he does this, he gives us an illustration as often in the Bible, by showing us the difference between daylight and darkness. And in daylight, he says, and especially during those times when there's no street lights and so forth and so on, you can walk and travel safely to work and do what you need to do when it's light out. But at night, you would stumble because you do not have a light. If any of you have lived in the outskirts of a city or been in a blackout, you know that it is really difficult to see when there is no light at all. Jesus reminds us here that he is the light of the world, and that his work or his miracles that he is performing at the moment are here to show who he is, but they will only last for a certain amount of time. So Jesus is still explaining further to his disciples his reason for going to Judea again, and he tells them Lazarus was asleep and that he's going to waken him. Now, note at this point, even though he hasn't been told or been sent a message, that Jesus knows that Lazarus has died. He evidently knew this by some miraculous event. He just knew things. Remember, he could read the minds of people that were around him. But the disciples misunderstood him, as they so often did, and they are actually thinking that Lazarus is in a literal sleep. So they say Lazarus will wake up by himself, so why do we need to go? And, just in case the people know we're coming and they're going to find out, they didn't want to go. They were probably a little bit afraid because of the dangers that Jesus faced. So Jesus had, as he does to them and often to us through them, he tells them plainly that he meant not that Lazarus was asleep physically, but that he was dead. And this, the result of this is to leave no doubt regarding the intentions of Jesus at this point. He knew that Lazarus was dead, but he still intended to go wake him up. And, we know that it's more than just a shaking of the shoulder. He intended all along to raise him from the dead. This was his plan. If it wasn't his plan, he wouldn't have waited 2 days. The second he had gotten the message, Jesus would have, dropped everything and gone to the home of his friends. But he knew what was going to happen, and he understood that this was all for the glory of God. He kind of says he was glad that he was not there earlier, because if he had been there earlier, then obviously he would have healed him, but this gave him a reason to do a really great miracle and give people the faith that they needed. This is a plain statement as to the purpose of the miracle that he is going to perform here. He has not gone to prevent or stop Lazarus from dying. This is definitely going to be a more powerful miracle with more convincing proof. We know he had healed many people of their sicknesses, and that was fine, but some people still didn't believe, even though they saw it happening over and over again. This time he intended to give the ultimate proof of his power, even over death, not just over sickness, but over death. There are many other passages in the Bible that speak of death as sleep, so it's not odd that Jesus would speak that way. And the idea of this expression appears to be that dead people do look like they're sleeping, and so we will all, of course, in this sleep state, so to speak, someday be woken up in the resurrection. And we certainly do all look forward to that when we will get to see our loved ones who have gone before us. In verse 16, which, we didn't read, but if you want to go on reading in the book of John in chapter 11, Thomas spoke to the other disciples that they should all go and support Jesus, even if it meant that they were going to die. And it was determined, it was very clear at this point that no matter what the disciples said, that Jesus was going to go and they weren't going to stop him, so that if they did go with him, more than likely because they were with him, they would suffer the same fate as he. If you know anything about the disciples and what happens after the death of Jesus, you will know that the disciples weren't so brave when it actually happened, and that they actually fled. And we know Thomas as doubting Thomas, because he doubted even that Jesus had been raised from the dead. So I am going to close the message here for this afternoon, and we will pick this up next week. And I just would like to remind you of the announcements before we close and say a word of prayer. And that is tomorrow morning at 7 o'clock on WBSM 1420 AM 99.5 FM is the Happy Bible Hour, and we are continuing on in the book of Joshua on that program. And that our website is peopleschristian.com, and that all of our services have been uploaded to YouTube so that you can catch them all there, and you can find that easily by going to our webpage at peopleschristian.com. And so you can find that by using the tab there for the YouTube page. They are usually uploaded immediately after the service. Today's will not be so quick. It'll be a few days later, but it will eventually be uploaded also to that YouTube page, and you can catch it there if you missed it today for some reason. So I want to go to God in prayer now. Just a reminder, there are many people that need our prayers at the moment, that are going through some difficult times, whether it's physically or emotionally, and it might be financially, if they have had difficulties staying in their job because of certain things that are going on in the country. But whatever the case, we know that many people are suffering greatly, whatever it is. And of course, we always should keep in mind remember to pray for our country. So let's go to God in prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you this afternoon for this opportunity to give the message that you want us to hear. The fact that Jesus loved his friends and that he took care of them and that he knew exactly what it was that they needed, that he was there for them. Help us to remember to be there for our friends and our family when they're in times of need, whether it be just a call or a text or a card that we send or giving them a shoulder to cry on, whatever the case may be. Help us to remember to be the good friend that Jesus was to his friends as we start out the new year. Help us to make that something that we really look at and really do for our friends and family. This afternoon I pray that those that are sick be blessed, those that are mourning feel your presence, and those with financial difficulties look to your word to see what they can do. I also ask blessings on our governments, both local and national. Blessings and protection on our president and his family, along with our service personnel and their families, our first responders, volunteers, missionaries, and Christians throughout the world. You know the needs that they have, and please help them and guide them and direct them as they do their jobs or just spend time worshiping you. I thank you this afternoon that we have had this opportunity, and I pray that every word that has been said be to your name's honor and glory in your Son's name. Amen. I want to thank you for tuning in this afternoon, and remember, God is good all the time.